9 to 5 तो है कहने को दिन, लैपटॉप का बस रात में मोबाइल हुआ। ना रही ये लाइफ मेरी, ना मैं अपनी ही लाइफ का रहा। पूछो ना मेरा क्या हाल है, नौकरी चली जैसे बस गुलाम हुआ। सोचता था when I grow up, जब चाहूं होगी मॉर्निंग और जब मैं कहूं तो आएगी रात। टाइम टेबल और कैलेंडर तो लफ्ज हो जाएंगे दफा, अलार्म क्लॉक का ना रहेगा नामो निशान। अब तो जैसे कि कैद में रहने की प्रैक्टिस था बचपन मेरा। 9 to 5 तो है कहने को दिन, लैपटॉप का बॉस रात में मोबाइल हुआ। रास्ते मेरे और हैं, मैं तो यहाँ का हूँ ही नहीं। करता हूँ जो जरूरी है, पर जो चाहत है मेरी, दिल को अब रोकना है इम्पॉसिबल हो रहा। Just like old Freddy, I want to break free. No more meetings, ना ये लैपटॉप ना है अब तो बस दिल की कही। EMIs का कोई डर नहीं, रिपोसेस कर रहा हूँ अपनी लाइफ आज और अभी। You got one life, make it count. 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 Repossess कर रहा हूँ अपनी लाइफ आज और अभी।
Welcome to another episode of the Second Innings podcast series. Purpose, passion, joy are becoming more and more important to all of us in our life journeys, and this is especially true in our work. Many of us are doing this through rediscovering ourselves by changing tracks in our lives to a second innings. Our Second Innings podcast is where we explore through conversations with guests like we have today how some people have been doing these transitions. We uncover their stories, their experiences, and their learnings. Transitioning to such a telling and listening to such stories helps all of us. Let's dive into today's podcast episode. We have a couple of great guests with us, Vikas Tandon and Siddarth Menon. Vikas is 54 years old. He told me to tell his age. I didn't do it myself. And he has grown up and lived in Mumbai pretty much all his life. He's the youngest of three siblings with a doctor and a dentist for sisters. Being always a bit of a nonconformist and also not as conscientious as his sisters, he pursued a bachelor's degree in commerce. He tried his hand at corporate jobs for first 6-7 years after having done his MBA at IIMA Ahmedabad, and offered all and sundry like himself the opportunity to become entrepreneurs. He started a digital agency called Indigo Consulting, which was one of India's most successful, I might add. In an amazing stroke of good fortune, being very modest here, Indigo Consulting was acquired by Publicis in 2012, after which he had the choice to continue as an internet entrepreneur, leader, or pursue his real, first, and always passion, music. He decided to choose the latter, and he's going to talk a lot about that. Our second guest is Siddarth Menon. He is a sales, marketing, and strategy expert with over 20 years of experience. Having worked with Coca Cola and Colgate to begin with, Siddarth joined Epigamia as a founding member and has helped scale it to a recognizable and a very, very well distributed brand. He is now an advisor and consultant to startups and works with them to build playbooks for growth for them. He has worked along with the organizations like the Bombay Shaving Company, Sugar Cosmetics, and many more. Siddarth, welcome to the show. He spends a lot of time training and teaching on leadership and marketing, something we'd love to talk to you about also as well, Siddarth. Thanks, Vikas and Siddarth, for being here. I'm going to start with you, Vikas. Would love to hear a little bit of your backstory, your origin story, how you kind of grew up, how you found your way to becoming who you are today?
Thanks very much, Atul and Suman, for having me on the show and for the kind introduction. Great to meet you, Sid. Um, as you said, brought up in Bombay in a pretty standard middle class family in Shivaji Park in central Bombay. We were a family of six at the time, including my grandmother and of course my two sisters. Childhood was pretty normal, going to school and playing, etc. But I think for me, obviously, one of the highlights of my school life was when I really discovered my passion for music, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about that later. But I was really very lucky. I consider myself very fortunate to have discovered that early. I'm not from a musical family as such. My parents and my family, all of us really love music. I've always loved music, and we used to always listen to music, watch movies. So that's probably how I kind of enjoyed it, or got into it, and then for some reason discovered that I can hum a tune, and that's how it got started. Yeah, so as a middle class family, my parents have been very liberal, really. So there was no pressure on academic excellence as such, but it was a given. If you want to have a good career and if you want to kind of do well in life, you will need to pursue some kind of a professional education, and so my sisters got into the medical professions. Both of them are in the US now, have been there for many years. I have been a bit of a wanderer, and uh, more importantly, I think one thing that contributed to my decisions has been that I'm very bad at planning. I just cannot look too far into the future. So I never really planned ahead ki, what do I want to do, whether I want to take up science or commerce. As you're probably aware, it was three streams: science, commerce and arts. So it was very opportunistic, jahan mil gaya wahan pe le liya types, situation. And so I kind of got into commerce, and it was only in college that the realization that this degree is not going to get me very far in terms of career, that I explored. I think I've always been very interested in technology, and on hindsight, I do feel I could have probably benefited from studying engineering. Didn't realize that till too late, but that got brought MCA, as a career option, and then there was the MBA. So these were the options that I considered. Eventually, ended up doing the MBA. I don't know if it's relevant, but I didn't really get into IIM in the first attempt. So that's been another thing that it was important for me that wherever I study, it's good, and including commerce or science. One of the reasons I took commerce was because I got into a good college in Bombay. I was in Podar College, one of the most reputed colleges for commerce in Bombay. And so I actually got into NMIMS, and which was also a very reputed institute, but for some reason, and the other big driving factor for me actually was that I was very keen to live in a hostel. I was very enamored, and even in Podar, I used to actually hang around with a lot of my closest friends, were and have been people who were from out of town, and so I used to hang around in the hostel quite a lot, and that was a big motivation. And so it kind of spurred me to apply for the IIMs again, and fortunately got in the next year. And as far as a career is concerned, so all through school, college, in college is really when music pretty much became a part of my identity. So just backtracking on the music part, it's around the fourth or the fifth standard that I thought I like singing, and I thought I can hold a tune. So I participated in the school competition and managed to win a prize, and that kind of encouraged me quite a lot. And then the next year I appeared again. I got the first prize. I got the third in the first year, and then the in the fifth standard, and then the first prize in the sixth standard, and then continued to participate. And in college, I started learning to play the guitar. And as at that age, you kind of start exploring your own identity. So music pretty much became my identity. That's kind of started what I wanted to do, define me. I got into rock music at that time. So again, there's a huge the icons and the iconography of rock is quite strong. So that's kind of what I started identifying with, and I've carried that through wherever I went. Even at IIM, you know, f- my I was less interested in getting the degree and more interested in forming a band and doing shows, which we did. We performed at the famous Louis Kahn Plaza, which was a dream come true. We used to hang around with bands from the other institutes. And when it came to deciding the career, again, I was very clear that, if I can do something relating to music. I knew that I was not talented enough, or in any case, music business was hard, so I couldn't really make money, and I needed to. I mean, we were all right, but I needed to kind of start supporting myself pretty much as soon as I left finished my MBA. And so I needed to make money. And so I tried my hand at getting jobs in the music business. From campus, there wasn't any option. Actually, the RPG group used to come to campus, but for other companies, group companies, and I kind of pushed them into finding me a position in HMV. And which they very kindly did, but unfortunately, it was not in a location of my choice, or it was in materials management, which was not really, the part of the music business I wanted to be associated with. The other decision I made pretty much at that time was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur at some stage in my life. I knew I might need to do a job for some time at least to support myself and to understand how business works. But that was the other thing, and therefore the opportunity to work in a small travel company in the UK is the job that I took up. One, because it was international, and second is because it gave me a chance to work in a small company, understand entrepreneurship a little bit better, and that's what I did. But the music bug was very strong, so I came back to India, got a job with Magnus Sound, which was the most, pioneering, innovative music company and successful music company at that time. This was in 1995. Worked with them for a couple of years. Got hired by Sony Music when they were launching their India operations. Spent another year or so there. But in about that much time, in both these companies, I was in a sales role, and not really that close to the creation or the marketing of the music. And that's when I felt that I think I need to step back and understand this more, and I need to find some. It's also the right time for me to start something of my own. I actually uh, did start a business sitting from home at that time. This was in 97 on the side, which was trying to develop. There used to be this catalog stationery business called Staples, I think, and which I'd seen in the UK when I was working there. And I tried to replicate that. And I said, there's a demand for good quality stationery that can be delivered. And typically, the way things worked in India is that you went to your local stationery shop and he gave you some very rudimentary kind of products. So I actually tried to start that, and I made money in my first year as well. So that's another thing I discovered. I was reasonably decent at hustling my way through things, and sold some gifting stationery items. Got the dealership for one brand. I can't remember which one it was, but I actually became an authorized dealer for one of the brands. But in the meantime, the internet thing had started in India. This was 96, 97. I was invited to set up and run the internet marketing division of Mudra Communications. At that time, there were, I think, there were three companies that did websites in India, that designed websites. One was Rediff, I think the second was Planet Asia, and the third was India. Rajesh Jain's company. I forget the name. These were the three companies that were doing websites, and I think were pretty much the fourth. I'm talking about large companies. I'm not talking about people that did small websites for small scale businesses at a corporate level. I think we were probably the fourth. So that was a great experience. Got me into a business into an area that I had no clue about, but gave me the entrepreneurship opportunity that I was looking for. And as it turned out, right place at the right time. And so in 2000 I decided to kind of uh, take the plunge and say, okay, this is it. I can't get a better opportunity than this. I stepped off the Mudra bus to actually start a .com, but that was unfortunately also the time when the first .com bust happened in 99, 2000. And so we were not able to secure any funding for the idea that we really wanted, which was a fungible rewards program, a rewards program that could kind of, which of course payback and all of these other things came much later. But 99 is when we wanted to start something which was a fungible rewards program. That didn't happen, but what I knew was building websites. So I said, okay, let me get started with this, and eventually something will emerge. And I set up Indigo Consulting, and I, again, right place, right time, got lucky, grew from pretty much. This was with a partner of mine at that time. He then eventually exited the business after 2 or 3 years, but we grew from pretty much zero to. In 2012, when I got offered to be acquired, we were about 180 plus people. And by the time when I completely exited, which was 2015, after 15 years of running that business, just over 200 people maybe. Yeah, that was a major crossroad for me to decide whether I wanted to continue building on the success that I was enjoying in the internet business. But I have to say there wasn't even a shadow of doubt in my head that for me this was like I had been handed get out of jail free kind of card. Ki, ab, now you do what you want. And so really, I mean, at best it was always, hey, along with music, can I do something else? It was never that, maybe I'll just put music again on the back burner for a little bit longer and continue to kind of, build on this. So that was never an option. And yeah, so since then I've been advising a few companies, so that's a little bit on the side that I do. And other than that, I've been learning music, playing music, now recently started creating my own music as well, and also exploring a few business ventures, but less from purely trying to look at making money, but more in terms of what probably the industry could benefit from.
Would love to have Sid jump in now and talk a little bit about himself and his backstory. Sid, over to you.
Thanks, Atul and Suman, and nice to meet you, Vikas. A super fun and brave journey. So, congrats on that. Yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a Malayali boy, but like many Malayali boys, I've not lived in Kerala. My parents, my dad is from Bombay. Almost all of his family had moved to Bombay. So I born in Bombay, and like many Malu boys, I've not brought up in Bombay. My parents took me to the Gulf, so I spent 10 wonderful years there, partly in Muscat, another part in Dubai. A lot of my schooling was in the Gulf. Something about the Gulf did not work for me. And to date, I'm unable to pinpoint what that is. And it could be another conversation for another day. But I decided to leave the Gulf, and I decided to leave my parents. They were still in the Gulf. My dad had a job. I moved back to Bombay, and I was staying with my grandmom. And I said, let me do college and education and further education here. And that's when, like you, Vikas, science did not work for me. So I said, commerce is the next option. And I did commerce for about 5 years. The good thing about the good thing about Bombay is there's this wonderful innovation called junior college, which is 11th and 12th. It's a fabulous innovation. I recommend it to everyone. So I did that, and I did 3 years of commerce and a couple of years of MBA in Bombay. So Bombay, for all practical purposes, has been home. It's the formative years of my life.
I think you left the Gulf when you were around class 10. Is that
16? Yeah, after 10. Yeah, after 10.
Okay.
And then, so straight off campus, I got hired by Coca Cola. I spent a couple of years with them. Coca Cola bought me in as a management trainee. One of those Jedis. They treat them very well. 6 months of training. You go across cross-functional training, marketing, sales, production, HR, so on and so forth. And at the end of 6 months, they ask you, where do you want to be placed for a full-time role? Me being a Bombay boy, I said, what? There were 4 options that they give you: north, south, east, and west. And me being a Bombay boy, I said west. And lo and behold, they sent me to Bhopal, which is part of the west region, but the furthest from Bombay. So here I was, Malu boy who never really had to speak Hindi. Most of my friends in Bombay all spoke English. I did a smattering of Hindi. Here I was in the heartland of MP talking to FMCG distributors. And I remember my first conversation. I remember this very, very clearly. I sat next to him and I asked him in my little anglicized Hindi, he says, "Aap kitna karoge?" And he said, 50,545. And I was like, what is that? So I spent a year and a half in Bhopal, and I spoke so much Hindi. Not to say I'm good at it, but after a year and a half, I started speaking English like Hindi. So I started saying things like computer, distributor. It just came so natural to me. So I spent a couple of years in Coke, in MP. My first opportunity to change a job was Colgate, and they were offering me an interview to be conducted in Bombay. I jumped at the thought of going back to Bombay for an interview without any intention of joining them, to be honest. I hope they're not hearing this. But I went for that interview. I thoroughly enjoyed the interview, the person I'm speaking to, the organization that it was. So I decided to just jump, and I spent 11 wonderful years in Colgate. I did pretty much everything that had to be done within sales and marketing. Colgate is an organization with many functional silos. So I did about 7.5 roles in that 11 years, right up to my last role, which was heading the business in the North. Again, leadership role. I was one of the youngest in that role. So I was really flying high. I felt I was invincible in many ways because, I kept moving every year and a half, doing different things. And now here's this great responsibility. And I spent 2 years doing that, and they were the worst 2 years of my life for many reasons. I think one, of course, I had a 1-year-old son, and I wanted to spend time with him, but the job was keeping me away. And number two, for some reason, everything that I threw at the job wasn't delivering the results. And I did not know why. So obviously I brought a lot of stress back home. I had a lot of stress and things weren't working out. And there was nothing that I could do or tell the organization that I wanted another role or something. So it didn't work out. So I had to step down from that role. I decided I'm going to take a little bit of a break to reassess. Thankfully, I could do that. My wife, Sakshi, who we got married in 2008, had a great job. So she could sort of hold fort at home while I could take that break and spend time with my son and reassess goals and what I wanted to do. And in that, what was meant to be a 9-month break ended up being a year and a half. But that year and a half gave me a lot of realization of what went wrong and what really excites me and what energizes me. I think a couple of reasons why I didn't do well in that leadership role. One is I'm a bit of an introvert. Now, you put an introvert into an office space for 12 hours, moving from meeting room to meeting room, conversation to conversation, a bunch of Excel sheets and so on and so forth. I think it takes a lot of energy out of you. If I look back at my career, I was doing well in jobs that required a lot of problem solving, strategy, and I wasn't doing well in operational roles. And I figured that strategy is something that energizes me. Execution I can do, but if I keep doing it regularly, it takes a lot of energy out of me. And the third thing that I realized is everyone in my team was like me. So we all love strategy. We are all introverts, and that there were no complementing skills that could drive in. So if I knocked on large organization doors, they would have given me business roles, which I knew for a fact that I'm not the best at. I needed strategy. I needed marketing. Here's an opportunity to, I think it was the time in India, it was in 2015, where there were a lot of consumer product company startups. So I sort of knocked on many doors, spoke to a bunch of founders, and I landed up with Epigamia. I think we clicked. I liked what they were building. I was very excited about the people that I was going to work with, the space I was going to work with. And I remember even telling the founder of Epigamia that I'm going to do this for 5 years with blinkers on, because at the end of 5 years, two things can happen. Either we don't do well and we have to find something else to do, or we do well and the next phase of growth will require someone who can sort of take that, and it's not going to be me. And lo and behold, that 5 years happened. I think we did really well. I decided to step down and go even more 30,000 feet. I said, let me advise and help startups on strategy. So I spend a lot of my time now working with startups to create a playbook for the next 5 years for them. Everything from brand strategy to category strategy to go-to-market strategy to designing the organization, and so on and so forth. I also dabbled a lot in training and teaching. I love the process of facilitation, and therefore I do a little bit of that, be it training in the corporate space or teaching MBA students as is. So that's a little bit about me. I'm married to Sakshi, like I mentioned. She's doing the corporate role. She's holding fort in the organization while I sort of swim in different waters. I have two children. One is 13 and 8, two wonderful boys, Raghav and Rian. And yeah, I'm based in Delhi now. So for the last 13 years, I've been in Delhi. So it's slowly but surely I'm moving from a Bombay boy to a Delhi boy. It's happening.
I was going to apologize on behalf of all of Delhi to you, Siddharth, for what we have put you through in 13 years, because I apologize to myself every day for having to live in Delhi.
Yeah, do that.
Anyhow.
And I wonder which boy to use, starting from Mallu boy to Gulf boy to Bombay boy to Colgate boy to Delhi boy now.
Why is it how proudly you spoke about the fact that you've become a Delhi boy? I mean,
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. I thought he would say that I'm here as long as I have to be. Okay, so Siddharth, just to you spoke to us the other day when we were chatting, and you talked about the power of awareness, and you did kind of touch upon that in various aspects, not figuring out, but realization of being an introvert, realization of the fact that you enjoyed certain strategic roles far more and so on. And so I'd like you to just talk about that a little bit, the power of awareness, how that has shaped your transition and your realizations in that transition.
Yeah, just to add to that before you respond, also this fact about, you said the Gulf didn't work for me, but you're all of 16 years old. So was it a realization even then that, maybe I need to get into a different space?
Yeah. No. So I'll answer the first one. I think I was, in hindsight, I was following a cultural script, right? Either that script is by society or, like I said, Colgate every year and a half said, Sid, good job done. Now we need you to follow this, and now we need to do this, right? So at every point in time, you were necessarily following things without really understanding that the next phase, what does it take to do well in that next phase, right? What is it that you have that will help you, or what is it that you don't have that will pull you down? And I think I never really assessed these things. I was following a cultural script. I remember when we were doing our BCom, it was fancy enough to do a CA along with it, right? So I did it. I did it for like 1 year and I quit, right? But I did it without thinking whether that's really what I want to do. I joined an MBA institute because that's what everyone used to do, right? I mean, we all joined MBA because, I mean, you had a goal in mind, which is to make money or which is to do the right job, but you just did it. And you did marketing because, not that I liked marketing, but I didn't think I could do finance. So if there was some cultural script that you were following without really assessing what will it take to win. And when I say what will it take to win is what really energizes you, what are you good at, what is your ecosystem, what's the environment, a bunch of things that you need to keep in mind. And that kind of hit me, like in Colgate, the last job that I did, I was set up for failure. I mean, there's no way I'm a good business person. I mean, unless I really work hard at it, of course. And therefore, it required me to hit a wall. It required me to take a break to assess. And in that assessment, I realized that, there's a lot of things that I missed out on. If I had known I was an introvert, I would know how to manage my days. I would know how to manage my time. If I had known that, listen, I love strategy, I know who to work with. So, I remember when I got that realization and I joined Epigamia and I had a team, the first thing I had to assess is who in my team is really good at execution. Who in my team will stop me and say, Sid, all this yarn is great, but tell us what to do, right? There had to be someone. So you had to surround yourself in that environment, and that power of awareness has helped me. Today, when I take on consulting projects, I spend a month understanding what it takes to do this consulting project. Who are the people I'm going to work with? What are their strengths? What can I count on them on? Because I know stuff that I'm not good at. So for example, my natural disposition is to zoom out. If you get me to zoom in, I'm not the best at it. And my attention to detail is very poor. But there's someone in that startup who I know who will help me do that, right? I'll get them to help me to zoom. So I think there's a power of awareness because there are natural strengths and natural dispositions that we have. And you must milk them and leverage them. You can work on certain things that are weaknesses, but there's an environment that you work with that can also help you. I think the power of awareness has helped me realize that you don't have to do everything and you don't have to be good at everything. Leverage what you're really good at and have fun doing it. And what you're not good at, yes, some of them you can work on, or some of them you can just ask for help. And I think that power of awareness in that break that I had really helped me. And now when I try, whenever I get into any project, I sort of spend a lot more time zooming out and understanding what will it take. If that project's next month, how do I see that next 6 months happening? What is it that's going to help me do well? And what is it that's going to pull me down? And of course, sometimes you learn by trial and error. But even if you think a little advanced, I think it really helps.
That is so powerful. I think that awareness thing, and we've talked about it in multiple sessions with different people. Because the sense I'm getting is that awareness came to you only during the final years of Colgate, where you'd already worked for so many years, right? And that's when you decide to spend those 9 months to kind of just do an assessment, is it?
Yes.
It also sounds a bit like a critical thinking. It's not just asking the what and how, asking the why questions, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's deducing from certain premises, certain conclusions. Yeah. So there are certain premises that I saw in, where I did well, what moments in time was I excited, when was I really in the meeting and when was I really pulled off the meeting. You had certain premises and you built some conclusions out of it. So it required some degree of critical thinking, without doubt. Not to say that those premises were right, but at least that's what I believed was right. And then you arrived at it and you keep learning as you go along. So there was some degree of critical thinking in hindsight. But I needed a break to do that. It wasn't possible during the run-of-the-mill that, you're working 10 hours a day. It just wasn't possible.
But was there a trigger, or is there a trigger for people to develop self-awareness?
This is work in progress, but I am now aware of moments of stress that I have. So I'm aware of my hands going a little sweaty. I'm aware of withdrawing. I don't want to be in the room. So there are broadly 3 ways that you deal with stress. One is you're like me who wants to leave the room. Just leave me alone. I don't want to deal with this. There are people who deal with stress by saying, oh, it's stressful. I have to solve it. Till I solve it, I'm not going to sleep. and there are people who just generally create chaos, right? So I think we all have a natural disposition to deal with stress. I think I'm aware of that disposition. And if there are constant and regular moments of stress, then you know that something is wrong. I also believe, and again, this is a work in progress, I believe that my core, everyone has a core emotion that is a trigger. I think anger is my core emotion. Normally, I'm a very peaceful guy. But if I get angry, there must be something that's wrong. Something that, an anger could be because of injustice, could be incompetence, whatever it is. There is anger, and you sort of realize that something's off. So you need to sort of sit back and say what went wrong. So there are certain moments that I feel that I sense that there is something wrong. You need to reassess. I'm a little more aware today than I was then. When if you told me while I was doing that 2 years in Colgate that I was stressed, I would have denied it. I would have totally denied it. I remember that Monday morning that my last day was a Friday, and I remember Monday morning waking up feeling completely different. Like, who is this person? Like, you felt fresh, and so I was able to make the difference between being in a stressful state and being fresh.
Suman, it seems to be a little bit about that push and pull we keep talking about, right? That for Sid, the push was a complete incompatibility between what he was doing and who he is. And you know what you were asking about, that what triggers that self awareness? I think it has to come out of some deep thought, yeah, which is what he did for that 9 months period. Because I don't think it can come out of day to day rigmarole. It's really, really hard to do that. But yeah, I think the push was really strong for him, it sounds like.
But to even assess the push and pull for yourself requires a fair bit of self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
For some people, the push was like some of the guests we spoke to. Somebody said, "Hey, I didn't like the job. I didn't like my boss." Somebody said, "I don't like bosses to begin with." A blanket
Yeah.
statement. So those are clear pushes which you're aware of. But sometimes, everything is going fine, but you're saying, "Hey, is this really what I want to be, or do I?" So that's when you're asking those hard-hitting questions to yourself.
Yeah. I also I am a firm believer in the power of language as well. I think for one of the reasons why I'm doing training, Suman, is I've realized that training has a lot of these frameworks. And when you go through these frameworks and you reflect on your past 20 years and say, oh, when was this framework in practice in the last 20 years? It's essentially a language to an experience that you were not able to, let's say quantify, or you're not able to sort of put words to it. And I think language helps put words to it. So I think reading it really helps. I think you put a language to an experience, and then you're able to reflect and think, oh, that's what it really meant. I think that also helps in many ways.
Yeah, I think that's what you spoke about. The power of awareness is so important, and in the context of my conversations, also, I mean, a lot of people come up to me and tell me, "Oh, you're very lucky, that you know what you wanted to do, and that you're doing what you're able to do." And I'm thinking that there's nothing special that I have that you don't already have, or that you're not probably better than me at a better place than me. But I think the huge difference has been awareness of everything, awareness of not just about yourself and what where you're comfortable and what causes you stress, but also what your goals are. And the other trigger, you mentioned stress, you mentioned the power of language. The other trigger that I feel is extremely underrated is getting bored, to kind of to trigger that self-awareness. We are so conditioned to keep ourselves busy, to constantly find something to do, that we never really get a chance uh, to be forced to dig really deep to find what we want to do. And a lot of that blame, I would say, goes to society and the way it's structured, especially our economic life. But we never get a chance to be able to, like you said, you're on the flow, ki BCom, so then CA, and then get a job, and and you're kind of you're never able to get off the treadmill, which is why when you were able to kind of get off that, probably for most of us, when we are able to get off that is when we are able to reflect deeply, and because there's nothing else to do, there is no meeting to be done, there's no fire to be fought.
But you were talking, Vikas, when you were telling us your story. You've had two significant transitions, apart from the smaller ones of job changes and all, which we don't really, in the context of second innings, don't really consider as transitions. But you had a very strong transition from the time you were working at Sony and going into doing Indigo Consulting, thinking about a startup for a period, and then post acquisition, which again was a very big decision for you to take, because as you and I both know, in an acquisition story, it's very, very easy to get aligned with the new business, with the acquiring business, and there's so much joy in scale, in regional roles, and so on. You could very easily have taken that on. Now, yes, I'm sure self awareness played a very important role, but what were the other kind of thought processes that you had, and were they similar in the two transitions, or were they significantly different comparing the first and the second transitions?
I think definitely one of the common threads between both the transitions was again awareness that came in pretty early, that I didn't really see myself fitting in a large corporate environment at all. That awareness came again, I would say probably during MBA, maybe even before that. And I somehow did not see, I was not, there was no clear vision. There was no clear kind of, no, there was no clarity that, yes, I want to be a businessman. And I had a picture of the kind of businessman. I wanted to be an industrialist or a stockbroker, or a, whatever, startup entrepreneur. Startups though weren't even there at that time in the early 90s. But I was very clear that it can't be working in a large corporate environment. I think that was a major trigger. That was a reason why in fact, I didn't really do very well at Sony. I was doing very well at Magnus Sound, but and I actually went through that transition where I joined Sony Music with kind of stars in my eyes. That, hey, perfect. I mean, I had been looking for this perfect blend of a multinational corporate organization and environment and job, but in an area of my interest, which is music, or entertainment. And I said, voila, I mean, it just fell into my lap, and here it is, and it's brilliant. But clearly it didn't. I mean, that was for me the litmus test, and it became very clear that that's not something that I wanted to do. So that was, I think, one very important, I don't know if external factor that reinforced what I felt, because I did feel a lot of FOMO. I did feel a lot of that, oh, I wish I was also in one of these large multinational jobs with a great brand and a good position, and traveling all over the country, the world, maybe with a well laid out ladder to take me to the top. But I went through that, and actually similar thing happened in Mudra. I mean, I joined it, and huge props to Mr. Krishnamurthy and Ravi Ratan Arora, who are the two people that they had the foresight to be able to separate this. And I got an environment where we could really be entrepreneurial. But at the end of the day, the context was still working in a large or a medium-sized company, in any case, in a corporate environment. So I think for me, it was primarily not wanting to be. And why that is so, I think, again, one of the things that I probably realize is, unlike Sid, I'm more of a detail guy. I like to, I'm not a scale person. I like small, and I like to do it well, and put all my heart and soul into that. And the moment it becomes too big for me to handle, I panic. Then I can't do that. So for me, again, when we sold Indigo Consulting, and we became part of apart from my latent desire to kind of spend more time with music, it was also the normal stresses. I think, like Sid explained, I had my stresses running the business, managing people, the expectations of clients, and constantly being on the hunt for new clients. I would I would come back home with similar kind of stresses, and it was not healthy, and I was not at a point where I did not want to be doing whatever. There were parts of it, of course, I love doing, but there were parts that were just. And then as part of Leo Burnett and Publicis, it was a similar story where we were independent, but still kind of oh, but your margins and your forecasts, and I said, this is not what I really want to be doing. And I don't know if that answers your question, but no, I don't. Apart from a clear awareness of really that this is not something I want to do, there weren't too many other triggers for those transitions. Sorry, one thing I will add, it's something that came to me when Sid was talking also, is that for whatever reason, I was never afraid of taking a chance. And in other aspects, not just in I'm not well, yeah, I'm not. I don't hesitate to take a chance. And for me, a big factor for that was the MBA and the education that I had. That was from the time I took the first job in a small company in London, and through every career change, I think knowing that I have a degree from a good institute that can always be a fallback has been a huge factor that has enabled me to do a lot of the things that I've been able to do. And I cannot understate the value of that in my specific life and context.
I'm going to go deeper into that because it is such a fascinating thing. There are very clear two different sides to that coin, because while you're saying it the way you are, that I had that MBA. Now you had probably a class of 200, right? At IIMA. The other 199 didn't think like that. They had the same reason you did, which is that you had the MBA degree and you're willing to take a chance. The other 199, maybe there were more than one who did entrepreneurship, but I'm pretty sure 190 to honge who did not think like that, right? And I'm sure that's true with Sid as well. There were probably many business heads in Colgate at that point of time, and none of them decided to quit on a Friday and felt great on the following Monday morning, right? So what is it? What is it? Do you think? And it need not be a you know paint the entire everybody with the same brush. We're talking about you as an individual. What is it that made you take that chance but doesn't make or let me not compare with others. What is it that that's gave you safety rather than risk? Because many other people think of it as, यार आई एम अहमदाबाद से अभी एमबीए कर लिया है, अब तो कॉर्पोरेट में टॉप तक जाना ही जाना है. That is what is the way to do it, rather than not risk it. It's two sides of the same coin.
Sorry, I mean, I'm again pretty clear. If I have to, say it in one phrase, I want to live life on my own terms. That is a starting point, and that has been a guiding force for me. So, hey, I want to live life on my own terms. I want to be doing the things that I want to do, not because they are things to be done. And therefore, I was able to see the MBA or the education as a safety net that allows me to do that. I don't know why it doesn't, why the other 190 do not think like that. I mean, I can speculate, but it will be at best speculation. But for me, I mean, it was very clear that I want to do, and I want to be able to live my life the way I want to be able to live. And this gave me the opportunity.
This is a very important thing you're saying, this thing about not afraid to take a chance, right? It reminds me of this one person said that the question was why. He said why not, and me and Atul have been talking about that. It's such a small change, but it completely reframes in our head as to, when you say why not, you're anyway willing to take that chance, right? Now you're trying to find reasons as to why you shouldn't be doing that, right? And I think that's the starting point of actually making the transition, because one is a cognitive process. We can do all our Excel sheets and all that, but taking the plunge is always the tough one, isn't it? And I think that at that point, not being afraid helps immensely in kind of really taking that leap.
Yeah, and what was the fear really for me, at least when I speak? At least for me, the only fear was not being able to make a decent living. That was the simple risk I ran, because there was no fallback for me. Literally, when I started my company, I was already working for 7 years. I was married. I didn't have a child then at that point in time, but I was all married, and I was working, and I was supporting my family, and I still didn't have a huge set of savings to fall back on. I remember my partner and I each needed to invest 3 or 4 lakh rupees in the business each, which is, even at that time, was not a humongous amount. This 1999 or 2000. I didn't have that money either. I borrowed that from my brother-in-law. You know, so it was, to that extent, one could take a risk. One could call it a risk, and of course, I took that chance. And the only reason I could take that chance was because I always felt confident that, God forbid, if it doesn't fail, naukri to mil jayegi theek thak. And that was my only consideration, that hey, I should just be able to earn a living. The rest, I want to do what I want to do. You know.
But again, sorry, Suman, but again, Vikas, but the way you framed that, the reason I was smiling was that, again, you framed it as all I had to risk was this. But most people who don't do it, those 190, that's exactly the reason they don't do it, because they do. That's all they can risk. So it's a framing thing, and it's that why not thing a little bit. So Vikas was always asking himself, why not? Yeah, let me just go for the 3-4 lakhs, brother-in-law. ठीक है. And this is part of the hustling thing, right? And I honestly, I don't like the term hustling because it almost sounds a bit like some people have it and some don't, which is not what it is. It's about building that attitude of doing what you need to do. And I just feel that you're just framing it in such a beautiful way, where you didn't use the term why not, but the why not bit is so strong that it just makes you do certain things exactly in the same in the same frame. So for example, like you were saying, that it's not like you came from a crazy rich family that you had nothing to lose. You had a lot to lose at that point of time. So that's amazing. And same with Sid. I mean, he had a 1-year-old son. I like the way he's saying, I wanted to spend time with my son. You have a 1-year-old son and you have a wife. Fair enough. She's got a decent job as well. But that's risk, boss. A lot of people don't do it exactly for those reasons. And that's something. Sid, do you have any thoughts on this? That
Yeah.
why did you think of it as a risk worth taking, but many people don't?
So my risk is out of desperation. It was not an active choice. I mean, nothing was working for me. There's no job in Colgate that I wanted. Colgate did not want me after a point because they had built me to be this business leader. And they're saying, you know what, you just, and for all practical, they said, okay, we made a mistake. And I remember speaking to my boss and he said, yeah, you were not the right person for the job. We should have moved you to a strategy role. So I think I made that choice out of sheer desperation. I wouldn't call that ever an active choice. I had the comfort of knowing that there was one income that was coming in, and I had some savings that could keep me. And I had the comfort, like how Vikas said, I had a pedigree. So it's not like doors won't open for me, right? So I had a pedigree. So please note, I think I was in a very privileged position. Unlike Vikas, who, had to go asking for 4 lakhs. I've seen founders who have their own money in it, and I can imagine the risk that they have and the risk that they take. Please, I am far from it. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm incredibly privileged when I jumped. It was a tough situation, but I jumped because I was privileged. But to your point, why do some people do and don't? I think that I realized when I had to make the choice in the break. Do I do my own startup or do I join another startup? I mean, there was, there had so many ideas in my mind that any of those ideas I could have said, you know what, let me start up myself. Why, join somebody else? I think each of us are very, very different. I realize, and I'm a marketeer, and we do a lot of need scoping of consumers. And I realize that my core need state is harmony. And what does harmony mean? That this person cannot do anything single-minded. It's impossible. I can't imagine myself spending 12 hours doing one thing in a day. I have to read a book. I have to spend time with family. I have to spend time with colleagues, and I have to play a sport. I need harmony during the day. And if I was a founder, I would have to let go of that. As a business head, I had to let go of that, And I think we all have our natural dispositions. My natural disposition is harmony. One of the reasons why I spend 1.5, 2 hours with myself in the morning before the day starts is I've done that. Because the risk of losing that 1.5 hours for an introvert is huge. So I need harmony. I think we all have a natural disposition. And my natural disposition is harmony. Be it in a meeting, be it with the family, be it at work. Which is why I'm never a good business leader, because some business leaders don't work well with harmony. They need to push things through. One of the things with
understand what do you mean by harmony? Is it more balance?
It's harmony is a state where you want to be with a group of people, but also feel the comfort of being by yourself. So there's a balance in everything. Like I can't give up something to. I'm not going to be the one who says, you know what, I'm going to give up family time for the next 6 months. It's just impossible for me to do that, right? And it'll cause. I mean, I can do it, but it'll not be a natural state for me. And in that natural state, I may not be at my best. I'm at my best when I wake up early in the morning. I've done my workout. I've read a book for half an hour. Then I'm happy to get into a meeting. Then I want to take a break, have lunch with somebody. Then I want some time with myself. Then I want to do some work. I think my current lifestyle is the best because I'm managing my own time. I'm doing different kind of projects. I'm not wedded to one. I'm teaching somewhere. I'm working on a strategy project somewhere. So I think that because my natural disposition, harmony, this is a safe space for me. Tomorrow, if I decide to do my own startup, needless to say, I'll have to dedicate 10 hours to that one idea. And that is not my natural state. Can it be my natural state? Yes, it might require some work. It might require some effort. And I don't know what Atul saying, why didn't you do your own startup? The other reason why I didn't do my startup, I realized for you to make that big shift in your natural state, you have to be super passionate about a project. Like, this is it. And I didn't find an idea that I was super passionate about as well. So these two reasons were the main reasons for me to not sort of do my own startup and then join another startup and be part of the founding team.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because initially you said some time back that a lot of people say you're lucky that you knew what you wanted to do, which is really great. But often what we found out is more than knowing what they want to do, most people are very clear what they don't want to do. Also part of being aware, right? Like Sid was very clear that certain things that he doesn't want to do, right? Which he calls harmony.
No, I agree. Like I said, I was very clear. I didn't want to be in a corporate job. I mean, reasonably. So that was a very strong motivator for me to kind of pursue what I want to do. But the other thing, what Sid just said has triggered something, and please don't take it the wrong way. It is not meant to negate what he's saying. The other thing I found about passion, since we are talking about passion as one of the key kind of subjects here, one of the vitiations that probably has happened is that we equate passion with success, or the passion should necessarily, one assumes, will lead you to becoming damn good at that, or you are already very good at it, or becoming very, very good at it. I have actually come across, this has been a learning for me, that over the last few years that I have dived deeper into music, into learning music and playing music and interacting with other people who love music and do music in one way or another. I've come across people, for example, who are learning music, and forgive me for saying it, but they're not very good at it, right? But it doesn't bother them. We are so conditioned to think about passion, and one of the reasons, I feel, my hypothesis is that one of the reasons which stops people from pursuing things that they would like to do is they're afraid that they're not good enough at it, that they're not good at it. If I love cooking and I cook food and my food sucks, nobody wants to eat it, is that necessarily a condition for me to stop cooking or to stop pursuing my passion? And therefore, is real passion one where you're happy to do it and you love doing it even if you are very bad at it? It's a different matter that I also believe that the more you do something, you will naturally get better at it. Whether you like it or not, that will happen. That will be a natural outcome. But to kind of equate the two, to have those two as simultaneous, even subconsciously, I feel that is probably one of the things that stops a lot of people from really getting behind themselves for something that they like to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more that we tend to equate passion to being able to do something really well. And
Excellence.
I think that's a great point. Totally agree.
For me, it's very relevant. I can fully relate to what you're saying. I also do leadership development, and having worked for over 20 years in the IT space, I was always very passionate about leadership development, but I was never good at it because I never done it. Right. So it took me a long while to actually start getting better at it. And if you're more passionate about it, the more you do it, you actually do get better and better.
See, it's also a factor of in what context are we talking about this passion, and we talked about it, in fact, in our last episode, Suman, with Pooja and Vikram. And Pooja was making this point that does passion necessarily have to be something that you feel that can be your primary vocation, your work? Can passion not can be a side thing that you do? And if you do decide passion is something that you enjoy doing and becomes your primary vocation, does that always last? Sometimes it doesn't last. I mean, you enjoy doing something doesn't mean, like Vikas, you're saying, it may not be excellent at it. And frankly, if you're not excellent at it, it's extremely unlikely that you can make a good living out of it. And then it goes into how does it connect with what you feel is your purpose in life. So, for instance, you're interested in music, clearly passionate about it. Now, but you may not, and I'm just taking an example, that you may not want to be the person who teaches hundreds of people music, because that's not your purpose. Whereas someone else who's interested in music may have the purpose, yaar, logon ko sikhana hai, I must build the tribe and all of that, right? So I think passion is great, and we were talking about this, Vikas, day before yesterday, that about the portfolio approach to your life, right? It's a good idea at an early age to start developing passions, and passion need not be one single passion. It could be two, three things. Yeah, you could be interested in sport and music and cooking and clay modeling or whatever, and maybe one of them becomes your primary vocation or transition a second or a third innings later in life, or it doesn't. It's just something that helps you to relieve stress in life and have some fun, do some different things.
Absolutely, and conversely, passion is not a necessary condition for you to do well at something, and it's something that you start. If you can separate the two clearly, that I'm doing this for a reason, let's say for to make a living or to achieve some other goal, then it's a job that has to be done. Then it is not really about how much you love doing that. It's about how much you care about doing it well. And for me, at least, I feel that wanting to do something well is a far bigger determinant of success than being passionate about something. Of course, if you're passionate about something, it might come easier to do it well. And
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. You answered my question.
Episodes, remember, Atul, Somil mentioned that we were talking about passion. He said passion, purpose, these are very big words. I don't like to think it that way. I just feel it's like just have fun. That's the word he used. Have fun. And that kind of ties to passion, because one of the definitions is if you're passionate about something, you would want to do that even if you're not getting paid for it. It's because you just enjoy doing it.
Which brings me to another area that we can talk about. And Vikas, in your case, it could be at either of the two transitions, which is that what was the thought process in terms of financial preparation that you guys kind of went through? And I know your decision making was quite different, because for both your transitions, the second one, I'm sure the financial preparation was made easier by the fact that at that point you were financially relatively very comfortable, and then you could do what you wanted to. Sid, did you give it some thought prior to, or you just jumped into it and then thought about it? How did you kind of guys go about that?
Vikas, you want to go first or should I go first? Okay. I'm incredibly bad at money, in wanting money, desiring money, managing money. And I've never been good at it. Again, the privilege of having earned money and being able to spend continues. When I took the plunge, I had a broad at a very 30,000 feet that we are safe. I remember taking out my PF and putting it into my bank. I regret that now, but I did it, right? Because I wanted that safety. I didn't want to put all of that pressure on Sakshi, though I'm very cognizant that since I'm swimming in different waters, that pressure continues to be with her because she has got a steady stream of income. My consulting will be great one month, will not be good one month. So that pressure still exists. I'm aware of that. But as far as managing money, I've never been good at. At a very 30,000 feet, I know there is enough money somewhere in the system. I remember it was only about 3-4 years back when both of us sat down and said, let's make an Excel sheet. And the intention of making that Excel sheet is when can we retire? Okay. The goal was to retire at 45. That Excel sheet said that you can retire at 60. If I go and look at that Excel sheet now, it'll probably say you'll retire at 70. So honestly, I'm the worst person to tell you that, did I have any plans for money? No. At a very 30,000 feet, I knew broadly it's fine. There's some inheritance that's going to come in. I'm going to continue earning. I can dial down and dial up our life. We didn't have these kind of assets that cause a lot of pressure. There were some things that we were very particular on, and we should be able to afford that at a very 30,000 feet. Honestly, it's only now that we're really thinking a little bit more. It's only now that we're going and talking about wealth, and we're talking about kids, and we're talking about those sort of things. But that's one of the regrets I have, which is to say, if I thought a little bit more about this, and if I was aware of the eventualities in life and what you need to keep in mind and what you could make and what choices that you could make at a very early stage, I would have gone back and done that. I think I'm still in a position to do that for the next 15, 20 years as much as I work. So now we're doing that. But earlier, honestly, Atul, there's no words of wisdom from my end on this.
But one clarifying question, when you said I was safe, right? So there's some figure in mind that you have which makes you safe, right? There are two ways of looking at it. Some people say, okay, I'm in my late 40s, early 50s. I've made a corpus, which will, even if I'm not working, kind of retirement, that money is good. As opposed to somebody who's saying, you know what, I have enough money for the next 2 years and I'll figure out something in the next 2 years, after which I'll have the money, right? So one can approach it in both ways, right? So one is enough money for the next, whatever your runway you define, or, a much larger corpus. So which one was it for you? Were you like safe for the first? Yeah.
No, more the latter, which is saying that, it's a 9 to 12 months we should be able to manage. It's not an issue. If tomorrow I decide to quit my job, we have enough coffers to survive for a year. It's not that big a deal.
Okay.
So that safety was there. There was no, um, let's put it this way. Maybe I shut off the former, which is to say, boss, let's think about a little further down the line that if you don't earn for a year and a half, what is the impact, that it could have? That is something that I regret not doing at a very early stage, and even now. There was, again, we never talk about, and this is tough to do because I'm a bit of an idealist. Um, but I think it's good to put down goals that we have. Do we want to own a house? Do we want to spend on kids' education? What is our lifestyle going to be? What do we want? It's good to put those goals down. I think an exercise that we did 3 years back really helped us at least identify goals. Have we worked towards those goals? No. But now I think between the both of us, we're very clear of some of the goals that we have. And we have to work towards it, right? But yeah, if to your answer, I was feeling safe for the next 1.5 years. Was I feeling safe for the future? I think I had the privilege of not thinking about it. If I started thinking about it, I would have felt a little stressful, but maybe I didn't think about it then.
And by his own admittance, Sid works at the 30,000 feet strategy level. This nitty gritty somebody else needs to handle. Boss, मुझे नहीं पता ये Excel कौन बना रहा है कौन नहीं बना रहा है. Broadly, the situation looks good.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Talked of frameworks. One of the frameworks, it's not a framework. One of the fun things that I mention in my workshops is there are two kinds of people. One is a PowerPoint guy, one is an Excel guy. Okay. So one is a big thinker and one is focused on the details, right? So it's interesting because you said you're more like a detail-oriented guy and said you're one of the... but it's so true. Some people
It's
are
true.
just more, yeah.
Vikas, your thoughts on this financial prep thing?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I completely agree with it. I must say that that's a great point. For anybody wanting to take a risk, whether that risk is that of entrepreneurship or of starting a second innings, if you think about it too much, the answer is more often than not going to be no, don't do it. So sometimes over planning and over forecasting is also not a good thing and kind of can prevent you from doing things. So and I think in that respect, like I mentioned, that I'm maybe detail oriented, but I'm also not very good at future planning. So I think I had 3 stages not two, but 3 stages. And for me, actually, the bigger one was after I left Sony Music and between Sony Music and Mudra, because I had started the dialogue with Mudra. I was not sure if I wanted to take it up because I had started this business. And I remember now the brand that I'd got the distributorship was for Tata Press, had some gifting stationery and stuff like that. And that was but at that time, yes, that was the only time I made a calculation of the runway, because like I said, I had to support myself at that time. And, I had so much money in the bank. When I started Indigo, which was maybe a year or less than a year, and I said by that much time this cash flow from this business should start, and it had started. So I felt a little okay with that. With Indigo, it was actually even less than that. Like I said, I had borrowed money, and we were a little more organized about it, that we had borrowed money and we had funded the company, and we were paying ourselves salaries out of that. And that salary was obviously the bare minimum survival salary that one needed. And literally it was on a month-on-month basis. Any month that we would not have made the revenue enough to kind of pay the salaries, I would have been out looking for a job. So, that was another situation where I think at that time I did not think about it, and that's why I was able to push my way through it. And I always believe tremendously in destiny and luck, and I really got lucky, and with not having come to that stage. And the last stage, when I sold the company, of course, I was the luckiest really in that sense, that uh, I experienced complete financial freedom, where I don't have to worry about making a living or about fulfilling my responsibilities towards my son and education, health and stuff like that. Beyond that, how much is a very, very personal and individual thing, I think.
Absolutely. There are so many people who will be in financially much better positions than all of us, and yet would not take the plunge, yet would not say, just one more year, just a couple of years more, I just need this or this to fall in place. So at any point there's going to be anxiety and risk, whatever financial level you might be at.
No, absolutely. And, on that, again, I think like we were discussing, that I've really found 3 things that hold people back who don't have a financial constraint to be able to do that, to be able to take the plunge if they want to. I mean, one is, for whatever reason, they they would like to kind of continue in their financial goals or their financial aspirations might be different, and that's each one's own prerogative. The second is, very often people don't feel insecure about letting go of what you've already created. As an early starter in the internet business, and then having sold the company, that was around the time I was getting called to speak at conferences, and people were calling me, youngsters were calling me for advice and stuff like that, and it can get quite heady. So there is a very real insecurity to be able to to let go of all of that. So that's second. And the third is a lot of people not being comfortable, like we discussed, the need to constantly keep doing something, and people worried about what will I do with myself. Either I don't know what my passion is, or I really don't think I can keep myself occupied, and keeping yourself occupied becomes a very important thing. And these are the three things I found that tend to hold people who don't have a financial constraint from living a free life.
That just triggers a thought for me, for each of you. Is there a right age to do this? Would you have liked to do it earlier than you did, or you would have liked to do it later than you did? Obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, you couldn't have known at that time. And in your case, because your second transition, the timing wasn't really defined by you, because it kind of, I mean, so I'm really talking about the first one. That, do you think you could have done it earlier or later, or is there any factor to that? Vikas, maybe you can talk about that first.
Yeah, in my case, no, actually, none of the transitions. I felt everything, because I think, again, I'm a flow guy. So wo jo ho raha hai, kind of, so has happened for the best, and so the situation emerged. The timing was right. Everything kind of happened at the right time for me, according to me at least. That if it happened at that time, that was the best time for it to happen. So I, on hindsight, do not feel that I could have about my last one. In fact, many people do ask, that, oh, do you wish you would have continued for a little bit longer? You could have either made more money or kind of, progressed. But no, that was what I felt was the right time to do something. And that's when I did it. The right time is when you are ready for it, not when something else is ready for it.
Musician and philosopher. Sid, any thoughts?
It's a tough one. I mean, would I have wanted to know my skill sets much earlier before hitting that brick wall? Of course. But I'm glad I hit the brick wall then, because I think working 12 to 13 years in large organizations built very strong foundations, built very strong functional skill sets, which I'm leveraging even today. Because these are organizations with 100 years of learning, 100 years of information. I had the privilege to work with great people for about 12, 13 years. I think that's holding me in good stead today. Yeah, the only thing I can say is that if I had realized 20 years later and then tried to jump into something like this, that would have been a little difficult. So if you ask, I think it happened at the right time. Now in hindsight, it feels that it happened at the right time, because I had the advantage of 13, 14 years of great foundational learning that I can still use and leverage today. So I have no regrets on that.
I still feel even this is about the same thing, about being in touch with yourself and being self-aware. Only when you are, then you'll know that it's the right time, and you just follow that.
And sometimes, like you said you hit a brick wall, to use that analogy. It's probably hitting the brick wall which triggers off your self-awareness also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you let the world tell you sometimes, right? Just be open to it. I think sometimes you will not know, and the world will tell you. Just have to keep your ears open, or you feel. I think there's a great what is the somatic experience that you tend to find. It's your body telling you certain things, and so sometimes you just get those cues. And I was lucky to get that cue. I didn't know what that cue was, but it took me some time to process it. But yeah, it helped.
What are the one or two learnings, or even more than learnings, unlearnings that you've had once you made the transition from what you were as a person, let's say, Sid, with you, for you when you were in Colgate, versus who are you as a person now?
Yeah, so I think the first one is the environment is a huge determinant on your behavior, your emotions. I've worked with groups of people, and that group can have impacts on me that even I can't realize. And therefore, I've had situations where we've been a co-founding team of 4 people, and when the 5th person comes in, things just change. It's just one dynamic. So you should be very, very aware of the environment, and you should be very, very aware, which I wasn't very early on. So now this whole process of zooming out that I tend to do once a month is saying that, boss, what has not gone right this month? And that could be people, person, environment, your family, something that's happening. It could be many things. And I think one must be very cognizant of the environment having an impact on you as against you being this person that is completely invincible. I think that's, to me, the biggest learning that I have. Number two, don't be good at everything. You can't. I remember this when I joined Epigamia, there was a mentor who actually connected me and the founder. And after I decided to join, I called him and I said, listen, any words of advice? He said, listen, Sid, you have to understand your role in that organization. There are a bunch of entrepreneurs there. They're going to do crazy shit. Okay. You don't have to do any crazy shit. You have to be the anchor. That's your role. Right. And I think we enjoyed the dynamic. So, Rohan was the dreamer and I was the anchor. And I had to say, okay, Rohan, you have this dream. And you know what? Now let's find a way to make it happen. I'm not here to question that dream. So I think understanding your role plays a huge thing. Don't try and be everything. But understand your role and be good at that. That's another sort of thing that I carry forward or have carried forward.
Excellent. Vikas?
Yeah, what has worked for me in life in general, and especially at work at Indigo Consulting, and the time before that, you mentioned why and then why not, and uh, extending that is also for me the other phrase is ye kaise nahi hoga. So perseverance for me has been an extremely important quality to have, that one to my mind must have, is not to kind of be give it your best to make something happen. If you've decided that this is something I need to get done or that needs to get done, I think having the perseverance, having the grit to be able to see through. I mean, we were speaking about that whole Magnasound incident was exactly that I just did not want to give up. Basically from campus I had wanted to work in the music business, and like I said, only HMV was the option from there, and Magnasound was the happening company. So I actually went off to an STD booth and called the managing director. I had no idea who he was. I found the number from somewhere. I don't remember, maybe Yellow Pages or some. From the cassette labels, from the inlay of the cassette, I found the number of the company, and I called them and I said I have something urgent to discuss, and I'd like to speak to the managing director. I didn't bother to ask for the marketing manager or XYZ manager, and he came on the line, and I told him what I've called for. I've called for a job. And he was extremely angry, and he said, you pulled me out of an important meeting telling me it's an urgent matter, you're lying to me, and he banged the phone on me. And I said, well, that's the end of that. And I went off on my job in the UK, and but the desire to work in the music business was gnawing at me. And I had come back to India, and literally kind of with my fingers crossed 2 years later, thinking ki usko shayad yaad nahi hoga abhi, let me take another chance. And I actually called him again. Same thing. This time I didn't, give any story of an urgent matter or whatever. I just said I'd like to speak to him. I'm looking for a job. And as luck would have it, he came on the line, and he called me for an interview. And fortunately, he did not remember that I'd called him earlier, and I got the job as his executive assistant. So I think perseverance is not giving up is a quality that I learned through those years, and I've kind of held very close and carried through.
Yeah, and when you're a business owner, startup, I think perseverance is one of the most important things. You just gotta keep at it. Just gotta, like you were saying earlier, that you just gotta decide what you want to do and go for it, and then some more, because it is going to stop you. It is going to hit you in the face. You just gotta keep going.
And again, in business, and Atul, you may have also faced that. I'm not sure, maybe Suman and Sid also, that when you're doing new business development in services companies like ours, you get a meeting somehow, and you take a call or you take a meeting, and then nothing comes off it. I would just keep in touch. I would make sure that, and sure enough, there have been so many cases where a client has turned around 2 years later, 3 years later. I used to do silly things, like I'd started at that time there was no WhatsApp, there were email forwards, and I started a little joke group, optional subscription based, and I would like, anybody wants a little bit of humor. And some of the clients had become friendly enough to, or were open enough to be okay with being part of that. All that allowed me to do was to stay top of mind
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Tandon exists, and and this is
It's just
what
a matter of timing sometimes. Yeah, it's just a
that
matter of
I
timing.
went to another company, and then from there kind of and I'm finding the same thing. It's very hard to get gigs, and
Hmm.
इधर तो phone भी नहीं उठाते हैं, the programming guys, and people who kind of give you shows. and you just have to stay top of mind. You just have to so that's again about perseverance and about the importance of relationships. Very important lesson that I learned.
Because I see one of the things that I struggle with my current job is to chase people. I mean, I need to do a lot of business development. I am a solopreneur. I believe that's the cool word to say right now. So I need to chase people to say, listen, hey, I'm here. Do you need any work done? And I struggle to, one, I struggle to cold call. I don't think it comes naturally to me. Two, I struggle to keep following up with people without them responding back. So my question to you is that and I'm persevering, but it's very difficult to persevere. Did that come naturally to you? I mean, was it like very instinctive and not too much effort?
No, it's frustrating, it's hard, it's irritating, but that's what grit is about. And that's what kind of digging your heels ki ye karna hai. That's for me, that's something I've identified as a quality that I have, where if it needs to be done, I'll cry, and I'll wave my arms about my way, but I'll kind of do it. So it is frustrating, it's not easy, dents your self-esteem at times, but you just kind of push through it.
I can't agree more with Sid. So if like the joke group that you talked about, if you have a grit group, please include me also in that group. I would love to
No, but
join.
the joke group idea he talked about, Vikas, is a very interesting thought. And obviously, that's not going to be relevant today, but there will be an equivalent thereof, because I think it's very interesting. And unfortunately, there are so many of these things happening on LinkedIn and this and that. People create groups. I'm sure all of us get invites for them all the time. But if one can, find a way with a core set of, I don't know, 20, 30, 50, 100 people, to find a way to always stay in touch for no reason at all. We had started this thing very interesting at Candid many years ago. We used to for every meeting, a business development meeting, we would take a pack of Ferrero Rocher, which was the cool chocolate at that time. So there was three of them, and we had a little tag on it which had a Candid tag, and it said "Goodies on a call for no reason at all." I remember the line even today, right? So, I mean, and we used to just take that for a meeting, and we used to just present it before the meeting. So it wasn't outcome based, so to speak, right? So and the person will go and put it on their desk, maybe share it with one or two of their colleagues, and some talk will happen. So, it's little triggers like this that I just feel that, you have to find a way to be talkable. That's crucial.
And what worked, I think, also was, and from one of the reasons I did that is because the obvious things to do that people were doing were to stay in touch. You have a newsletter, and that would give you updates about the company, about the industry, about what's happening. वो तो सब कर रहे हैं. I mean, that's not clutter breaking at all, And so it has to be something that is outside work. Was my criterion, and this was a simple, easy thing to do, and so yeah, I mean, that's something that I found. And even with this, like I said, I'm carrying the same learnings with my current role in trying to get gigs for myself and my band.
You touched, Sid, upon the solopreneur thing, and one of the areas that we like talking about is the importance of a partner. And when I say partner, I'm talking about a work partner here. Importance of family and all is something we can talk about as well. But a work partner, and Vikas, you did start with a partner, though later on you went on your own way. So how important do you think that is, not just from a business point of view, but from an emotional support point of view also, to have someone along for a journey? And it could be work in progress as well. I mean, like for you,
Yeah.
Sid, you're feeling that a little bit. So maybe we can start with you.
I think as we get older, connections are very important. Having someone along with the journey is super important. I think marriage plays a role in life to give you companionship. I think the same goes for business as well. It's important to have a set of people that you work with, and doing things solo may not necessarily be easy, and for multiple reasons. One is, of course, connection, having someone around at any point in time, knowing that you're not alone. Two, from a very rational standpoint, there are complementing skill sets that you can bring in. Like I said, I am a strategy guy. I'd love someone to come in and take on the details of this, because my projects involve that as well. It takes a lot of energy out of me, and I have to resort to somebody in the startup to help me do that. So there are complementing skill sets that comes in. I'm not great in business development. I'd love someone who'd love to be very pally with everyone, and I'd love to be not pally with everyone, but be open on LinkedIn. I mean, you need to be on LinkedIn now. That's the truth, unfortunately, to be heard. So someone who's very good on LinkedIn. So there are very complementing skill sets that somebody can bring in. And that's really the rational reason to bring someone in. The emotional reason is it's always good to have a partner when you're trying to do something that most people think is not possible. or most people think you're crazy, right? I remember Rohan telling me once that my biggest fear is that people say I'm not doing anything crazy. Because if I'm not doing something crazy, then why am I an entrepreneur? Right? And so I'm sure the entrepreneurs are trying to do something really crazy, and it helps to have someone do that crazy with you. I'm totally for it.
Though I'm also thinking some of the stuff you can also hire for. So would you rather hire or would you get somebody at your equal level as a partner?
Currently, I'll speak for myself. Currently, do I want a partner? No. A lot of stuff that I do today is very unique, and I'm fully involved with the startups that I work with. So I need to give my 100%. It can't be 50% this person and 50% this person. The nature of my business does not need a startup. But if I was looking to scale and I'm trying to do 20 startups at a time, where the nature of business is not to give 100% to one startup, but nature of business is to give 10% each, then I would rather have someone with the skin in the game as well. But of course, when you choose for skin in the game, there are various dynamics involved, which I'm sure I'm not experienced, but I think Atul and you and Vikas would have experienced. So the choice becomes that much more important. The variables are that many more than just going outside and hiring. So there's a pros and cons, but in the founders that I've worked with, they've always preferred to have a co-founder. And the only reason they haven't had a co-founder is because they haven't found the right one.
That's the thing, Sid. There's a very big factor of stage of life in these things as well. When I was in my mid-20s, which is when we started Candid, the person I started the business with was a very close friend of mine. There was a certain vibe and a connect, and it worked well, and then it did not. Vikas also started at a relatively early age. Finding a partner when as you're a lot younger than all of us, but still at a mid 40s, mid 50s kind of level, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Yeah, I mean, the whole dynamic of it, the dynamics you were talking about, becomes really very complex in that sense. Because your thoughts on?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of you, actually. I mean, so to summarize, I think it's great to have a partner. In my experience, it's great to have a co-founder. It definitely helps. But finding one is tricky, and it's definitely easier when you're younger. Very often, like I'm guessing that's what happened in your case also, Atul, that you started off as friends and became partners. And
Absolutely.
the thing, as opposed to going out looking for a founder. So here you're starting in the reverse, that I'm looking for a founder, and now let me see who can that person be. So when you start off as friends, you are kind of jamming on an idea together. You are developing the whole thing together. Here you have an idea already in your head, and now you're looking for somebody to uh, those parameters and fit those pegs, and then of course bring a relationship. So it's great to have one, but it's tricky to find a co-founder when you're looking for a co-founder. When you
Yeah. I'll give you a really interesting story on this. 3 years ago, and all three of you are aware of the Mojo Box story that I was doing. And if it was going to be a strong tech business, I realized fairly early, within 6 months of starting it up, that, the only way it was going to work was if it had a strong tech, um, at least a strong CTO, if not a tech co founder. And I actually went through a period of 1 year looking for a tech co founder. And I got onto platforms. I got onto things like the Y Combinator co-founder platform. I actually did calls with, over a period of maybe a year, I did calls and meetings with about 30 or 35 people, right? With a very clear intent, stated intent of being co-founders. And I must admit, I managed to vibe decently well with only one guy, right? And I started working with him, and we kind of got things going, not as a co-founder. We said, let's find out how things work and so on. And it's really, really hard. And it was across age spectrum. These people were anywhere between 10, 15 years younger than me to 5, 6 years older than me. And it's a really hard thing to do, because it's almost like marriage, right? You're looking
Yeah.
for someone like
Yeah.
that. So
In fact, again, another experience. So when I joined Epigamia, I was not a co-founder, but I was part of the founding team. So we were literally, you could call us 3-4 people who are like founders working together. And I think if I look at the stage of how we evolved at a very early stage, so before this, just step back. There are maybe Suman, you know this, but there are 4 factors of trust that people say. There's credibility, reliability, openness, and self-orientation. Is there a bigger goal than you as an individual, right? So very early on at Epigamia, we were all had very low self-orientation. We were all chasing this dream. at Epigamia. But as we moved and progressed, we went into this whole 360 degrees. And in one of my 360 degrees, one of the founders put me on a very low. I got 3 out of 5 on trust. So I was like, where did this come from? It like everything else I scored 4, 5. This one was sticking out. So I was wondering what's happening, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out. Okay, and I realized that the factor of trust that I was losing out was on reliability. And let me explain this a little bit. If there's a stressful situation, Siddarth Menon needs 3-4 days off. I need time to think. And that person, when he's stressful, he wanted to solve it then and there. So for him, I am not reliable, right? And therefore, while all of us were scoring on low self-orientation, I was losing out on points on reliability. And I think it's that those relationships are so complex on these 4 factors that very early on, 1 or 2 factors are most important. But as you progress and as things pile on you, all 4 factors become super important. And everyone has a bias towards factor, because I have a natural disposition on low self. I believe that anyone who has low self-orientation can be trusted, whereas that person had a natural disposition saying, for me, trust, most important factor is reliability. And I think that goes back to this power of awareness. Knowing your environment and what's really impacting the environment plays a huge role.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one, because reliability is typically whether the person will continue to deliver repeatedly. But here you're bringing in a time angle. So it's again perception difference.
So these are the things you kind of learn through experience, right? Because it's not something, especially at a younger age, when you're in your mid to late 20s, even if you know these frameworks, you don't really apply them the way you've gone through a life experience. So that becomes important.
Sure. Great. So I think we've already touched upon it in terms of both of you spoke about how you would have done things differently. But again, if you had to go back in time and do this whole thing all over again, what are the things that you would do differently and what are the things you would do the same? Maybe I'll start with you, Vikas.
I think for me, one thing is very clear as to what I would do differently, which is learn music and pursue music at a much earlier age. So I don't know if this is really relevant to the concept of second innings as such, but if you are clear about something that you like, I think the earlier you start and the earlier you kind of get into that field, the better the chances of both success and probably getting more out of that passion for you. But other than that, I think, and this may sound, we spoke about the co-founder thing. I think co-founder is one aspect, but having an advisor, in fact, not a co-founder, but a third party, what is called sometimes, that person could be, a life coach or a business advisor or a board member. I think that is something that I would have, probably had. I think they can help increase the effectiveness of what you're doing, and also I think in many ways help you with your self-awareness, knowingly or unknowingly. So I think that's something that I would probably have done differently, which is had somebody not involved in the business as some kind of an advisor, board member, coach, so to speak, to kind of help navigate some of these decisions. But other than that, I mean, I feel lucky and privileged that I think I've had a very, very good run so far.
Super. In fact, I came across this term called personal board, which I thought was interesting as a concept.
Yeah, that's
people who you can always go back to and check and bounce off ideas, and who are going to give you straight, right, as to what they feel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that we did well at Indigo. We could have done things much, much better if I had something like that.
Okay. Sid, how about you?
Tough one, but I can just think of 2. One for sure, very tangible. I would want to manage my finances better. Much greater awareness on the impact of what I'm earning and what I'm spending on. I think that is super important. The second one, I think, if I could at a very early stage ask myself these 2 questions is, where do I want to go and who am I as a person? I don't think I asked that. Today, in fact, when I teach a lot of kids, they all know where they want to go. There's complete clarity. It's phenomenal. It's infectious. It's sometimes even scary, but I don't think they spend enough time on who they are as people. I think these are 2 questions I would ask very early on, and I would spend more time on reflecting on these two things. I don't think I reflected anything in the first 10, 15 years. There was zero reflection. Now I'm spending a little more time on, I wouldn't say structured reflection, but even random reflection, which is really helping me in that sense. These two things, I think, is something that I would bring back in. I also thought, would I, now I read so many books and I'm fascinated by all the PhD that people do that would have been great at PhD. I would have loved to do a PhD. But then I go back and say, oh, you know what, I'm a person of harmony. I would have to give up a lot of things to do one PhD. So it's not the best. But yeah, I think the first two things definitely.
So if I may ask Sid a question about that, about the reflection that you spoke about, do you feel that, because that I sometimes also wonder whether, but I also, the other side of me also wonders that do we have enough material at that early age to do so much reflection? We are able to think about that right now because we've lived so many years of our life. We have a lot more material. At that time, we are actually in the stage of gathering material, gathering experiences, going after earning money, building a career, setting up a family, and so on and so forth. So it's more creating stuff that can be reflected upon. Otherwise, it becomes, I don't know if that.
So, great question. And I do a lot of work with the brands, who are probably 0 to 1 or 1 to 10. And the first thing I tell them that, and normally people say, 0 to 1, don't think about a brand, just build product. And I found there's a power in sitting back and writing one page about what your brand is. And what you write on day 1 might be completely different to what you write on day 10. But the chance on day 10 being right will be incumbent on what you wrote on day 1. I think you just learn, right? So I'm not saying that they should have figured it out, but I think just putting stuff down, they might learn and build on it as they go on. I felt I could have built on it. I felt that if I did it, I would have worked on some of my things that I think today I'll struggle to work on. I think that's the point. But you're right. I mean, it's very difficult at the age of 20 to 21 when you want to sort of blaze the world and you believe that you want to access everything that's new, to sit back and reflect. But the work that I do with brands, I realize what I do on day 1 helps me when I finally write down on day 10.
Super. Makes sense. Thanks.
And one is about balance. Knowing what you want to do at a very young age is a good thing, but as you said, Sid, can also be a scary thing, because once you're too focused on one thing, you're also kind of not allowing yourself to explore other areas, isn't it? Because everything is very dynamic. Our perspective changes. We as human beings change every 5-10 years. We're like a different person.
But I've seen entrepreneurs, and I think they have two very important strengths that I believe who do really well. One is entrepreneurs who believe they're in the business of imagination, and second is entrepreneurs who believe that evolution is a strength, so they're not scared to evolve. And therefore they learn faster and they're able to make changes faster. I think these are two very successful entrepreneurs, two traits of entrepreneurs that I've seen that make very successful entrepreneurs. And I could be wrong. I'm talking to Vikas and Atul, but yeah.
No, Vikas, the other thing you were talking about, that in the early years you're kind of gathering information or developing experiences and all, which is, again, and this links with what you were saying, that you wish you had been even more serious about your music development of the scale, etc., earlier in ages. Build your portfolios earlier in life, right? Things that are of area of interest, so that you're developing those areas of experience. You're developing, what you can be doing, what you're passionate about, what you're good at, not good at. Something that looks, I mean, I'll give you an example in same thing as your guitar thing. My son was learning the ukulele. He's 10 years old. About, I said, ठीक है, different experiences, ukulele भी कर लो, drums भी कर लो, सब कुछ कर लो, क्या पता क्या interest हो. And that teacher used to come to the house, and I always wanted to learn how to play the guitar, and I never did. Right? I never ever did. So I just randomly asked him that, can you teach me? So he said, ukulele also I can teach you, guitar I can teach you. You decide what you want to do. I said, I'll give it a shot to the guitar, because the ukulele seemed a bit small on my fingers. So he started teaching me, and I thought, it'll be fun. It was really, really difficult. And I gave it up after about maybe 2 months or something like that. This was last year. It's really, really difficult, especially at a later age, because your kind of that muscle memory is not that easy to develop when you're as old as I am. So, but these are the things. Maybe if I had done it when I was 25 or 30, maybe I would be as good as you playing the guitar. Who knows, man?
Hopefully better, because I don't say the way. Absolutely right. I mean, I'm facing the same thing. I'm learning Hindustani classical. I'm facing the same thing. Again, I wanted to learn because I started at an early age. It was very hard, got distracted by other things, and it gets harder. The other thing I also feel is, especially once you start working, like we discussed, when you do something for a long enough time, chances are you will get better at it. And because of structure of society or because of necessity, we all end up working. Many of us start getting good at what we are doing, and that success and everything else that comes with that is very addictive.
Shuts other doors.
That becomes a barrier very often for anything else to enter, for you to kind of want to give, because again the opportunity cost becomes huge. So that barrier becomes great, and which is why, again, to your point, that the earlier you start building that bank, building that portfolio of other things, you have something at least that, despite all the success, and achievement you're getting at work, you have something already developed, rather than starting something from scratch. Acha, ab kya karna chahiye now, what should I do with my life?
Which is why the use of the term portfolio, because like you have a portfolio of investments, just because your mutual funds are doing well doesn't mean you stop doing fixed deposits or insurance, right? It's a portfolio approach, which is why the use of the term portfolio, this book that I was telling you about, the portfolio life, which is that you develop it like a portfolio. Just because you're damn good at X doesn't mean you don't try Y, Z, and PQR.
Yeah.
So you just keep dabbling in that sense in
You know,
addition to your primary thing.
on the same note, I mean, I was speaking to you guys. There's this musician's vlog or YouTube channel that I follow, Rick Beato, and there was one episode that he had about, we talk about, while what you're saying is also important, he brought another contrary point of view, that it's one thing to kind of start later, to do something that, like you said, you always wanted to learn the guitar. I always wanted to learn Hindustani classical music, so we started that late. But it's also never too late. He was giving examples of people who've discovered that they're good at something at a much later stage. And that can only happen when you do something. So he speaks about himself, that he's a great musician, always been a great musician, but he never considered himself to be a storyteller. And he's a YouTube success. He's a huge success because he's great at telling stories. He did not know that about himself till he actually did that at the age of, I think he started at about 52. So keep giving yourself the opportunity to keep, not get stuck behind those barriers of success and everything else that kind of life of 20, 30 years in the corporate life will give you. So
Maybe I'll call that guitar teacher again. Give it yet another go. Any advice you guys have for people who are sitting on the fence, procrastinating taking the plunge or the jump? What would you how any suggestions?
I would say, take a few minutes in your life to reflect what is stopping you. Nobody can tell you what you should do. That answer has to come from yourself. For me, that has been the guiding factor. I've, like I said, I don't regret. It's things happened when they had to happen, and you just need to keep yourself in a state of readiness to be able to do things. So if you most of us, I saw your earlier episodes also, most people kind of look at something else because there's also a degree of dissatisfaction with what they're doing, or they want to explore. People who are happy, there are many people who are very happy continuing what they're doing, and they do that. So if you want to do something else but something is stopping you, take a few minutes to reflect on what is stopping you, and that itself will give the answers.
Yeah, I can only imagine what an overwhelming decision it is for anyone to take the plunge. It is an incredibly overwhelming decision. Most decisions that we have to take which disrupts life is overwhelming, be it marriage, be it kids, be it work. And these are very overwhelming decisions. And I don't have any advice. I agree with Vikas that I think reflection on what is stopping you is critical. But I got some good advice from Rohan once, and I liked the way he said it, because I'm sure, when he was in managing this journey, at every point in time, he must be asking himself, what am I doing? Because, like he said, he was doing something crazy. And he said he found a way to differentiate between self-doubt and self-criticism. He said, at no point in time should I be in self-doubt. I can criticize myself and I can learn from it, but at no point in time should I be in self-doubt. And I will do everything possible to avoid being in that situation. Now, he had a process. I don't know what that process was, but I like the nuance, the way he did it. I'm with Vikas. Reflection on what's stopping you is super critical. But apart from that, I wish I had any more words of wisdom.
I think that's a pretty profound one. I'm also thinking on self-doubt versus self-criticism. One thing that immediately jumps out is self-doubt. Typically, when we are, you know, hitting a wall, or something is not working out. Whereas self-criticism can be, even when things are good, you can always kind of keep challenging the decisions. Yeah, that's a good one.
Great. Yeah. What a great conversation. And you guys would probably think we say this to everybody, but this is one of the best conversations we've had. And I can also say that because I was, while we were going through the conversation, I was thinking about the editing, and I was actually just thinking there's going to be very little to edit in this conversation, because so many of the points are worth so much to, and I learned a lot from both of you. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It took us some time to get together, but it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I mean, I feel so strongly about this whole thing about living life on your terms and, being in touch with yourself and following your heart, that I've actually written a song on that, and, I'm going to take into production soon. But okay,
9 to 5 तो है कहने को दिन, लैपटॉप का बस रात में मोबाइल हुआ। ना रही ये लाइफ मेरी, ना मैं अपनी ही लाइफ का रहा। पूछो ना मेरा क्या हाल है, नौकरी चली जैसे बस गुलाम हुआ। सोचता था when I grow up, जब चाहूं होगी मॉर्निंग, और जब मैं कहूं तो आएगी रात। टाइम टेबल और कैलेंडर तो लफ्ज हो जाएंगे दफा, अलार्म क्लॉक का ना रहेगा नामो निशान। अब तो जैसे कि कैद में रहने की प्रैक्टिस था बचपन मेरा। 9 to 5 तो है कहने को दिन, लैपटॉप का बॉस रात में मोबाइल हुआ। रास्ते मेरे और हैं, मैं तो यहाँ का हूँ ही नहीं। करता हूँ जो जरूरी है, पर जो चाहत है मेरी, दिल को अब रोकना है इम्पॉसिबल हो रहा। Just like old Freddy, I want to break free. No more meetings, ना ये लैपटॉप ना है अब तो बस दिल की कही। EMIs का कोई डर नहीं, रिपोसेस कर रहा हूँ अपनी लाइफ आज और अभी। You got one life, make it count. 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 Repossess कर रहा हूँ अपनी लाइफ आज और अभी।
Fantastic.